Hello. I couldn't be more excited about this conversation.
I know we've been talking about this one just between the two of us for a while now.
Yeah.
And we just decided to do a podcast episode on it. And I'm excited too. I'm also a little nervous because I feel like I don't know. I'm pretty passionate about it. I feel like I might say something that makes people grumpy, but we're gonna go for it.
That would make me so happy.
I know you're always trying to get me to go in that direction. I don't want to, I want people to be happy. I don't want to make people grumpy.
No, I think it's not the truth. It's not about making people grumpy. We can't manage how people receive us. We just have to speak the truth. I don't like to say our truth, but what we found to know to be true.
Yeah, that's true. So, I'm excited. Great. Let's get to it. What's your question?
All right. So today we're talking about how to create excellence in people without crushing them. So in spirit of our conversation, my question is, when have you been crushed? When has someone disempowered you and taken your fire and made it to where you weren't empowered and you didn't really care to create excellence or be excellent?
No one puts this fire out, Christine.
I know. I was like, he's gonna say
no, that's not true. No, I mean, that is why I'm excited to talk about this, because I don't think any of us are absolved of being in environments or relationships where the dynamics shift and we are maybe even unintentionally or without knowing it, find ourselves not in alignment with excellence. So I actually have a clear example, and it sucks. It was shitty to go through. I mean, my first business I started, I had a pretty toxic business partner. Ultimately, that relationship was not one that was in alignment with how I do my best work and how I show up. And there wasn't a lot of trust there on both sides. And yeah, I mean, I definitely found myself over time just kind of absolved to doing enough to get by, or I don't even know that that's it, because that's not really in my nature. Like I always did. I found myself adapting my behavior and my workflow and the conversations I had to try to keep the peace, because I was just tired of arguing or not seeing eye to eye or getting overran by, this individual and not feeling or being heard. And instead of putting up with that or dealing with that, I would just adapt, and so that wasn't excellence, because it forced me to make decisions from a place of fear and self-preservation than what was my highest and best, where I might have a great idea or really want to run at something, or I was really excited about something, but I knew that it was going to spark conflict. And so I stayed away from it. So yeah, no, I mean, and there's been other examples, but that one popped in my mind immediately, because it really, yeah, it sucked. It was not and it didn't start that way. And I think that's, potentially something we can talk about today. There is an evolution of these things, but yeah, it was, that was challenging. And I think that's where you and I mean, to kind of open up the conversation, you and I started to talk about this, and there's, I find myself thinking about this a lot from a leadership perspective and my responsibilities within our companies is what is the right line, and what is my voice. And I think as much as I'd like to be confident in it, I think sometimes it falters, or I'm not 100% sure in what it is in terms of my standards for excellence, which are high. I'll make no bones about that. But molding that or delivering those standards in a way that's still supportive of other people, right? I don't want to be an asshole. I don't want to be hard to work with. I don't want to be like, there's these phrases that we use. We were talking about Martha Stewart, right? Like, that was, if anybody's watched that documentary, like, that's the example, and good, bad, or indifferent. Like, she built an empire, and she's incredible. She's brilliant. And so, but that's her brand. Everybody's like, she's brutal. Like, but she wanted excellence. So she went about it that way. Right.
Yeah.
And I really respect that level of excellence. There is a part of me that really, like, when I watched that documentary, I was like, yeah, obviously, obviously that's the way it should be done. Like, I was like, I fucking love you, Martha. But I don't want to hurt people's feelings. I genuinely, I do care for people. I want the environment to be great. I want people to like where they work. I don't want them to be scared of me. I want to be open and honest and transparent. I want people to feel like they can do that with me. And I think that's a really hard line to walk. And I said, I don't know that I find it all the time.
Yeah.
And so what?
I want to go back to one thing real quick that you said. Well, and I think your example, I just want to touch on this real quick. I think it's really interesting because your example exposes that the excellence of your results and how hard you work didn't necessarily change, but your ability to show up and share your ideas and connect with the team and your desire to want to be a part of it, the emotions of it and how you felt there. It's not that you just threw your hands up or quit or didn't work hard. So the results essentially were still there, but at a diminished rate, because the value that you bring, the uniqueness that you bring, didn't show up anymore because it wasn't being valued or it was creating conflict. And I think that's such a key part of this conversation, because just because your people are producing doesn't mean that there isn't a negative result and they're not shutting down, or there's not a diminished performance level if they're not feeling connected, if they're feeling burnt out. That has a completely different result, and it's not sustainable. And when we look at Martha Stewart, she doesn't keep people. And as we've studied this idea of layoffs and the Great Resignation, we know that there is a very real effect on our bottom line, on our customer satisfaction, when we don't have loyalty in our companies. And I think this is something that gets overlooked, and we have the swipe left mentality in corporate right now and in business, and it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. And then you have these on the other side, swing to the other side. We have these companies calling each other family. And then I saw a post the other day, you don't lay off family. So let's use language that actually matches our workplace, because there is an expectation in the workplace. So how do we how do we create an environment of excellence? Because I truly believe that excellence is actually good for us. When we do something excellent, when we perform at a high level, we're like, yes, that actually gives us confidence. So if we're looking at our people and they're just consistently flatlining and they're consistently dropping the ball, chances are they're diminishing confidence and they don't feel good about what they're doing. And sometimes that comes in blame, but at the end of the rope, it hurts their confidence. And that's something that we should care deeply about, because it doesn't just affect us, it affects their work experience forever. And we might be their client one day. So we should think about it. Right. And
Right.
I think that that's something as leaders we have to think about, because excellence at what cost is something that I ask myself often. But on the other side, empathy at what cost? Because this whole movement of empathy, I would take the bold stand to say it's not done well 90% of the time when we're trying it on. Like, I did not come out of the womb an empathetic, compassionate person. I have had that as a skill I've had to work on. And as I've developed that skill, it has been highly messy. But I think to create true excellence without crushing people and burning people out, we have to develop the skills, the EQ skills in our leadership. But where is that line? I struggle to understand sometimes in the trenches of leadership where that line is. It's really fuzzy. It's funny, your picture was fuzzy today. And I feel like that's exactly how I feel. I'm just like, it's so not clear in some moments when you have someone who you know is capable of more and you want to hold them accountable, but you don't know where the line is. Like, how much is too much? Where is that line? What does true empathy look like? Because true empathy allows us to rise up and it creates safety so that we can push the limits. And then false empathy is false responsibility, or it is a counterfeit of grace or empathy, and it allows people to get away with murder, which allows them to not perform well, which kills their confidence. So on both sides, we're breaking trust and confidence with our people if it's not done right.
Yeah, totally. I think I'm sitting here thinking about what that actually looks like, and I think it has to start with a culture of excellence. And I want to take a second to define what I mean when I think about excellence, because I think that also gets really fuzzy. And I think it gets misconstrued in the sense that we as leaders and as organizations often define excellence as the ability to do a task a very specific way, right? Like, that's the Martha Stewart way, right? It's like, you can't, like, in that documentary, she's like, you idiot, like, you're cutting the orange the wrong way with the wrong knife. Like, that's a task-oriented version of excellence that she had defined and then ascribed that to everyone else who ever touched an orange and a knife. But there's a million ways to cut an orange with a knife, right? And is there more or less efficient ways? Sure. So I think we need to, one, recognize that excellence is not defined by our ability to produce a task a specific way. Our excellence should be defined by our ability to hold ourselves and to call others to a higher standard en route to what we know is their full potential. Mm-hmm. And I think so if we start with that definition of excellence, and then if we build a culture around that, what we're able to do is to actually invite people in to the highest and best versions of themselves and truthfully call them on it when they're not doing their best. And it's not and it's truly from a place of being empathetic and being supportive to say, hey, I know that you're a part of this team because you value excellence, and this is not what that looks like. Now, your route to excellence for this specific task might be different than mine, and that's fine. That's not what I'm concerned about. What I am concerned about is I can tell that you're not showing up in alignment with our collective definition of excellence. And then you get to call people into an opportunity to step up and step into excellence. Because I think that's the problem. That's where we get into people get their feelings hurt. Because we say, hey, this doesn't work. This isn't it. You were doing great work, now you're not. You were bringing ideas to the table, now you're not. Or maybe that never happened, but when that doesn't happen, if we don't have a culture of excellence, and if excellence isn't defined appropriately, that's when people get their feelings hurt. And now we've taken an overcorrection or we've backed off. So now we're saying, like to your point, we're not even going to talk about excellence because everybody's going to get sad about it. And we're just going to we're going to overcorrect. We're going to over coddle people. And so that people don't get upset. And that is a disservice to everyone involved. Because like you said, people want to do great work. That's a core tenet of Impact Initiative and what you and I believe and know to be a fact. People want to do great work. Now, it is the responsibility of leaders to create environments where that can happen. Mm-hmm. But I think the overcorrection and our kind of collective inability to call people when they're not being excellent is a disservice, because no one wants to go home. I truly believe this. No one wants to go home and feel like they weren't excellent, right? Like who's excited about going home and be like, yep, today was mediocre. Like, I don't care what job you have, right? And even if you're not in a leadership position, and even if you think you're phoning it in the job, you still want to feel like you contributed. You still want to feel like you did something with your life and your time and your day. And like, excellence is a standard to which we can measure that against. And again, I think there's a different definition there, but yeah, I think it starts from the beginning. I think there's a re-engineering, a redefining of excellence that we maybe all should collectively agree on. I think that's where a lot of the kind of classic, asshole, I think that's what created the overcorrection, is people holding people to standards that don't matter. Right? Like how you write this report. I mean, yeah, there's SOPs and there's do it in the way that works for the business, but let people find excellence for themselves within the parameters of the work that they have to do. And if you're getting mad because somebody sent an attachment a different way or different, like, who cares? Right? Like, I think that there is an opportunity to really understand what our standards are and get very clear on them. I think they're different than what a lot of people might think they are. And then I think we need to be honest about what it means to hold people to them. And I think it really can be a culture where excellence is celebrated, because people are leaving when they close their computers down at the end of the day. They feel like they did something, right? They're not coasting. They've been held to a standard that makes them feel good. So
I think also it's not just about understanding that the definition or what excellence looks like as a culture, but you have to figure it out as a culture so that you can hire the right people. But that starts with the people you already have, or with you as the business owner, as the president, as the CEO, whoever is driving the company. You have to build that off of what you consider true excellence to be. And I think it has to start from a more intentional place than just this overarching definition of excellence. Or what I think we see a lot is we see excellence being created from a place of the market. And that doesn't mean just because it looks one way in the markets or in our competitors, doesn't mean what that should be our definition or what excellence looks like for us. And I think that is what sets companies apart. You know, the one that everybody likes to use is Apple versus Microsoft. It's because Apple actually sets it based off of their unique culture and what matters most to them and off of that culture. But then they hire people who match that and they bring that all the way, that through line all the way through. But when we're hiring, I think it's really important that we understand what excellence looks like to our people that we're bringing into our company. Because if we have someone that we truly believe in and they're having an off week, an off month, an off quarter, whatever that is, all of a sudden we get to come beside them and go, hey, like, it's not even that you're not hitting our standards, it's that you're not being you. You're not showing up as the best version of you. Are you okay? Is there something going on? How can we support you? And I think that is what allows us those conversations, and they're not easy, but those conversations are what allow us to create excellence without crushing people, in my opinion. And I think we have to take, so many people don't have any clue what matters to their employees at any level, and to their teams at any level. And we just expect them to show up and care about what we care about and what matters to the company, but we never ask them also. And I think that's a huge miss. I think part of it is partnering with what matters to them and partnering with their goals. And I think that it's challenging because people get defensive and they feel weird and vulnerable about sharing some of those things. But if we create a culture of it, it becomes easier. And I've seen our greatest results and our greatest performance when we're connected to our initiatives and we're connected to our team's initiatives. If I know a team member wants to buy a house or a car, or move, or whatever that case is, I'm going to get behind them. And when you do that to your team, all of a sudden they do it back. Right. And I think that it starts, I think you said this earlier, starts by by being the example, right? Like, be the example of what that looks like. And all of a sudden, I think it opens up for everyone to have that level of accountability and even come by and say, like, hey, are you okay? I love it when our team does that. Hey, you're off today. I'm like, oh gosh, I'm really sorry. But I love that they're comfortable enough to be like, what's going on? Are you okay? And you're like, yeah and no all at the same time. That takes a lot of courage for someone who works with us to ask that question. And that's something that I think I'm proud of that when it happens. I'm proud that, like, our team is comfortable enough to have empathy with us and say, hey, you're off. What's going on? You're not being you today. Like, what happened? Or this month? Or, that's happened to both of us in the last couple of years. And I think it's important to have that. Everyone says open door policy, but I don't know we know what that means anymore. Like, nobody has a door anymore. It's all Slack.
Yeah. I mean, what are you talking about when the door is open, I think, is the important piece. And I think I agree that shared goals, I do think, is part of the equation with that redefinition or redefining of excellence. To your point, I think having shared benchmarks. What does excellence mean for you, right? And how are we defining whether or not we've reached it? And like you said, I mean, excellence for people in our companies and can be all kinds of things. And I think being interested in hearing what their goals are outside of work.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is, and that, because what it allows you to do again is help people, specifically from a leadership perspective. It allows you to hold people accountable to what is going to help them stay on the path to accomplish what they want to accomplish. Again, like you said, if it's, I want to buy a house this year, well, if some point in that season they're not in alignment with behaviors that are going to elicit the resources necessary to accomplish that goal, you get to invite them into a conversation that helps them realign from a place of true value. Say,
Mm-hmm.
hey, like, I know this is important to you, and right now, like, you're not behaving in a way that's going to get you there, right? Whether, if that's however they're getting paid, whatever they need, say whatever. And yeah, I do think that is a part of it. I hadn't thought about that explicitly, but I think there is an opportunity there for like a shared language that just provides more clarity on or into what people want to do. And, I think as leaders, we just decide that these massive portions of people's lives don't matter in the business. We say, well, these goals are important here. What's that?
Hang it at the door. Like,
yeah, and that's crap. That's not going to work. These, we spend a lot of our life working, but people still have other goals. They still have other things that motivate them. They have, and I hope so. Like, I hope that they are a varied and, multifaceted individual. And so
that's an interesting point too. Sorry, I totally just cut you off. That's an interesting point too. When I was a competitive dancer for a pro team, we had to have other goals. It wasn't allowed that we could just be on the dance team. We had to have other goals and initiatives because they literally broke it down and said, if you don't, then it means that you're not going to be a strong contributor and a high performer because this is your only purpose. And you're going to base all of your value on how much time you get on the court and what your position looks like. And like, there was so many variables that would have eaten us alive if we made that position our purpose.
Mm-hmm.
So, sorry, go on.
No, that's great. And I think it is important. And I think recognizing that it's important by having conversations built around it helps us to better define excellence. And again, with the purpose of inviting people into conversations and inviting people into a level of accountability that holds them to a standard that they've set, right? When you set goals, it's not me telling you to do this thing. It's a conversation around what excellence looks like, how you want to excel, and then let's collectively move in that direction. And absolutely, we're going to layer in the key aspects of our business and and there's going to be standards there. There's going to be things that we have to do. But I think that there is just a much more, I really hate this word, but it's the only one I can think of. I think there's a much more holistic way to get at it, and I think that does describe it really well. And that really bums me out that holistic makes sense in that scenario. But I think that's it.
The whole situation, the whole person.
Ugh, gross. Stop. No. It just gets overused, right? Holistic's like one of those, it's like organic, right? Like, oh, I want to come at this organically, like whatever. No, I think holistic, and again, because it is a bigger conversation, and I think that is, for me, now that we're talking about it, I'm actually able to see it more clearly for myself. I'm like, oh, okay, that is the piece, and that when I feel like I do it well, I'm less focused on the specific initiative and more on how that individual is integrated into our team and like moving in a shared direction towards a common vision, and the nitpicky ins and outs and how they get there. And I don't find myself getting hung up in that stuff. Mm-hmm. Whereas if I'm not connected to that, I find myself getting frustrated and annoyed with somebody doing a specific thing a specific way that I think is not right or inefficient, and that's dumb. That's a waste of time, in my opinion, right? Like that's not what I should be focused on. I should be focused on keeping, essentially maintaining a current that takes us in the direction where everybody can reach their full potential and show up in alignment with excellence that we've defined like collectively. And now that we're talking about it, I'm like, okay, yeah, I actually see it really clearly for myself. Like when I get frustrated, I'm just not doing that. I'm just focused on the wrong thing. I need to come back to like a more broad definition of excellence and like what excellence looks like for us and our organizations versus this is how you do this task, or, the time allotment with that, the little nitpicky things that we all get frustrated, like, oh, how would it taken me 5 minutes and it took this person 30 minutes? Or why did it take this person a half a day to do something I know I could do in an hour? It doesn't fucking matter. It's not your job, right? Like if you hired that person, trust them to do it and then hold them to a standard that is over and above task orientation. I think that for me, like talking it out, I'm like, oh yeah, that really resonates. I think when I do it best, I'm just removed from the nitpicky Martha Stewart and how she cut the oranges and more like aligned and moving in a much bigger direction and like higher level. We sorted it out. Great. We did it.
Yeah.
Thanks. I got it. Awesome.
You're like, I'm clear. I think the other thing that's coming up, or the other piece of this, is people get burnt out or crushed when we're pushing on excellence through challenges. And I think this is a really big sticking point for most teams, because find me a team that has had no failures or challenges when taking something to market or whatever, insert initiative or a challenge. But I think that is a big part of excellence, is teaching people how to fail well.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, we've talked about that in other episodes. Maybe that's a whole nother thing, but the adage, of course, is you fail fast, and I think that we get that wrong. Like failing fast doesn't actually address how we feel about failure on the other side of it happening quickly. You can fail quickly all day long. It's a culture around what failure means and how you actually use it to inform decisions you make in the future, and the conversation around failure when it happens. And that's failing fast doesn't address that at all, right? We've used this like that adage to say that like, oh, we're a company that fails fast, and we're supposed to take that at face value and assume that means that organization also handles failure well. And I've found that to be nearly across the board false. If you say that about your culture handles failure pretty poorly. Mm-hmm. Sorry, anyone out there. If you have fail fast in your job description, we need to talk. You're probably not failing well, right? And that's the upgrade that I've used. I'm like, well, you can fail fast all you want. Let's fail well.
Well, and I think that starts with having the ability to be resilient and be agile on purpose. That's another catchphrase specifically in the startup world that we work in quite often. We're agile. I'm like, no, you're unorganized. Like,
yeah.
And you don't have a clear direction. You're not agile. But I think resilience and agility is something that actually creates, you have to have those things to be excellent. Otherwise, you will bury yourself in disappointment. And the people who truly live and are excellent, and the cultures that exude excellence, they have the ability to be resilient and agile when they need to. And they do it with communication and connection and respect for their team, because if not, your team is going to get crushed. It's not only that as leaders, we have to understand how to do that, which is hard. Ask me on a bad day. But we have to teach it as well. And we have to have a culture of it, or we're just going to be really frustrated with our team, because we'll do it well and we won't understand why everybody else isn't able to live in that with those characteristics and be fluid. And I think that it's coming back to the idea that it's never, I think the companies that exude excellence also and have a culture of high performers that are not burnt out, they don't look at anything like they've checked the box or they've won. They just know that there's always more to do and always more people to help, always more. Like, there's never like this line of like, we've arrived. I think that's another big piece of it is, and what creates agility and resilience is this idea that like, you will never arrive. Business is a game that doesn't end. Life is a game that you don't want to end. And when it does end, it's probably not, like there's no more. It's not like a great thing. So looking at things like there is no arrival, I think is what I've seen across the boards, what creates a really amazing culture where people are not getting burnt out, but still performing at a really high level.
I love it. It's a strong finish.
I knew you were gonna.
It's good. You have more mic drop moments than I do. It's great. Yeah. So, as always, if we can support, if any of this feels ambiguous, if defining excellence for your team, for your culture, organization is not clear, if it seems hard, if that internal communication is challenging, if goal setting, any of the things we talked about, that really is what creates impactful cultures. And that's what we're here to help people do. So if we can support, you can reach out to us at impactinitiative.network. Click the button in the top right corner, and we would love to chat with you and just learn more about where you're at. Even if we can just be a resource, we are truly here to support. So impactinitiative.network, and I hope to talk to you soon. And until then, see you next time on Impact Minded.